and welcome to Relationships and Astrology's Loving the Planets for January of 2019. 2019 already. I'm Armand Diaz in Long Island.
And I am Margaret Gray in Dublin.
Margaret, we've got quite a month coming up. We've got a solar eclipse, we've got a lunar eclipse, we've got Uranus stationing. Let's jump right in and start talking about the signs and how they're going to be feeling all of this energy.
Yes, it is quite a month. And I would say for the Aries Libra axis, and, you know, as we've said several times, when we look at these signs, we're talking not just about the sun sign, but also if your moon is there, if your ascendant is there, maybe even some of the personal planets, and of course for the people in your life. And we're looking very specific at the whole arena of relationships. And I'm not going to be talking so much about the astrology until the end, you know, until I finish the information about what's going on for people. So I'll mention it more at the end. I'm just really going to go through some of the relevant dates where the energies are really, I suppose, we're likely to feel them more. You're likely to feel them more if you have these planets in Aries or Libra. So let's start with the very start of the month. First of all, it's an action month. It's really an action-packed month. And it really starts on the 2nd, which is a really good time if you want to ask somebody out. It's really, I would describe it as a waking up of sexual energy and a lot of excitement around. So the reality is that relationships thrive when we're excited about life. I mean, there's nothing as attractive as somebody who is in the middle of a project that they really love, or they're just starting out with a project. I mean, they're like a magnet, because even if we don't know anything about their project or we're not interested in it, it's just so exciting to be around them because we can feel that passion. So this is a really good start of the month. There could be a little bit of impatience as well. Probably a good time to get lots of exercise in so that that impatience doesn't spill out on other people. Also, then the 6th of the month, that's a very, very important time for the Aries Libra. So the energy of change is going to amp up a lot. And basically because since early August, there's been a little bit of a feeling of stalemate in relationships, probably for these two signs. So at this time, there's going to be maybe a revising of issues that were particularly important for these two signs back in April and May 2018. So have a think back to what was going on. And this is going to give you an opportunity, maybe a final opportunity to make some changes. So this is likely to be a huge relief for anybody with planets in these signs, because both Aries and Libra energy love movement. I mean, even if it means letting go of some relationship issues, it's always better than feeling kind of really stagnant, which has been a real problem, you know, in the months that have gone by. The 18th of the month, as we're getting just a little bit past midway, great time, nice aspect for passion, fun, maybe starting to plan some travel, just the planning stages of it, on your own or with somebody else, maybe visiting friends, visiting people you haven't seen. Now, the 21st is a particularly interesting time in terms of committing, manifesting to something in a relationship. You know, it could be any kind of commitment. It can be a small commitment. It can be just a commitment to start seeing somebody regularly, or it can be a large commitment like, you know, buying a house together or doing something major. And then as it comes to the 25th, that's a very, very expansive end of the month. This is a wonderful time to take that trip that you both plan together, maybe on the 18th of the month. So just to say a little bit about the astrology for people who want to know the astrology of it. On the 2nd, it's Mars goes into Aries. On the 6th, we've got Uranus goes stationary direct at last. On the 18th, we've got Venus trine Mars in Aries. And then on the 21st, we've got Mars square Saturn, and on the 25th we've got Mars trine Jupiter. So that's it for those two signs. Those are the kind of key things to keep in mind in relationships.
And let's move on to the Taurus-Scorpio axis. Now, I think that things are a little bit edgier for those in Taurus and Scorpio. Now, you've had Venus in Scorpio for a long period of time, and she's going to be there until the 7th of January. So the early part of the month is kind of Venus at the end of Scorpio. You might still be doing a little bit more of that, you know, going back over the last couple of months of the retrograde and stuff, even though she's out of her shadow. And then she moves into Sagittarius. And I think that this could be a little bit of a thing. You know, Taurus likes things to be kind of steady and even. Scorpio likes things to be deep. And Venus in Sagittarius is really kind of a little bit more expansive and playful. And I'm not really sure that it's going to go all that well in terms of how that feels. It could feel a little bit like, you know, well, I don't necessarily want to go out, like, or let's talk about where we want to be ourselves, as opposed to what's going on out in the world and socializing. You know, Venus and Sagittarius is a rather social sign. I think also, too, a lot of the other things that happen this month are supportive. There's a lot of stuff happening in Capricorn and Cancer axis, particularly in the sign of Capricorn, where the sun is for most of the month. And I think that's going to be very supportive. So things like the solar eclipse on the 5th is going to feel something that is, you know, supportive. It's energy that can be worked with. I would say, just to pick something else that shows up there, I would say the Saturn-Sun conjunction on January 2nd, or the Sun-Pluto conjunction on the 11th, are times that these are powerful times. They're likely to feel very supportive for both Taurus and Scorpio. But the overall energy of the month, I think at the beginning of it, you can kind of work with it. It gets a little bit harder to work with it as the month goes along. There's a little bit, it sort of pulls you out of your comfort zone, if you will. And I'm not entirely sure that it brings you to a comfortable place. The full moon lunar eclipse. I can say these things. Full moon lunar eclipse on the 21st is at the very beginning of Leo, and that may hit Taurus and Scorpio sort of sideways. And again, this kind of let's get out, let's get moving, let's be social sort of energy coming up against the more the pull inwards that Scorpio and Taurus are likely to feel. So it's a mixed month. I think that there's, you know, there's times when the more serious, somber, and structural aspects of relationship are supported, but the overall vibe might be a little bit more outgoing than you'd like.
Interesting. Sounds a little gnarly, kind of just a little kind of, you just have to kind of a little bit go with the flow, which, you know, Taurus and Scorpio doesn't always like to do so much.
Not a strong.
Talking about going with the flow, looking at Gemini and Sagittarius, I think the core kind of energies this month for those two signs are freedom versus commitment. Now, those aren't unusual themes for those two signs to say, but I feel like they're particularly emphasized. And we still have a lot of Sagittarius energy around, with Jupiter in its own sign, Mercury leaves and Venus comes into Sag. So overall, it feels quite an expansive energy for these two signs. A lot about kind of learning new things, and by learning I mean just kind of getting an awareness, even, you know, insights. That's really what I'm looking for, that there's a lot of potential insights, and of course the kind of traditional meaning of it all, which is about traveling, really expansion. So if those two signs have felt a little grounded in the past few months, that's going to change pretty dramatically. It's pretty similarly in a way for Aries and Libra that I was talking about before. The beginning of the month, communication feels high on the agenda. Be careful. On the 3rd of January may feel a little tricky, and it might not be the best day to communicate something of major importance with loved ones. There could be some surprises in store, some old issues that kind of feel a little ouchy, a little maybe uncomfortable, may come up out of the blue. So be a little gentle with yourself and others, you know, at the beginning of the month. Towards the 7th, then self-value takes the spotlight, particularly for Sagittarius. So it's really an expansive time, you know, really fun time. That's very, very important. Commitment may not be very high on the cards, on the agenda, but it's a really good time to enjoy your freedom, you know, with or without loved ones. And there are always times, you know, in life where we just need to experience that sense of personal freedom. And then, you know, we can decide whether to be in a relationship or not. It doesn't stop us being in a relationship, but also knowing that we need a little bit of room to maneuver, a little bit of space. Towards the 13th, towards the beginning of the month, there might be a little bit of a clash at that time between the desire to merge with somebody and the equally strong desire to be free. So just to look out for that, to be aware that that's coming up within you and can easily be projected onto the other person. So careful not to sabotage relationships just because of wanting freedom. The 18th, oh, there's quite a lot of passion that could come up, a lot of excitement. Careful of not creating any drama. So maybe go on a new adventure, maybe with somebody new or with somebody, you know, you've been with for a while or even friends, but just do something that has a quality of newness about it. Sometimes that's all we really need. Now, on the 20th, there's the supermoon. It's the full moon lunar eclipse in Leo, of course, 0 degrees. This is, you know, we've got Venus in Sag square Neptune in Pisces. There's more of that energy of being torn between freedom and merging. So just to be aware, that's a particularly potential vulnerable time, just to be aware that that's going on. And then towards the 22nd, freedom definitely wins the day. That doesn't exclude relationship, but again, as I said, you know, freedom is paramount. And towards the 25th, then we've got a time of passion, potentially a lot of passion. So looking back over the astrology of all of that, it's really the beginning of the month, we've got Mercury square Chiron, Mercury trine Uranus. Then we've got on the 7th, Venus into Sag. 13th, Jupiter in Sag square Neptune. There's that pull between freedom and merging. Then we've got the Venus trine Mars, which is lovely, about passion. Then Venus square Neptune, Venus conjunct Jupiter. So you can see there's a lot of those Venus, Mars, and Jupiter aspects. And then we end with Mars trine Jupiter. So that's for those two signs.
Now moving on to the Cancer and Capricorn axis. If some of the other signs are taking the energy of the month a little bit more obliquely, particularly Taurus and Scorpio, Cancer and Capricorn are getting it straight on. There's a lot of activity in the sign of Capricorn, including the solar eclipse on the 5th, and also the Mercury-Pluto conjunction I talked about, and the Sun-Saturn conjunction that I talked about previously. So all of this is happening in the sign of Capricorn. So if you are a Capricorn, this is a time that feels empowering, but a little bit testing as well. When we play that into relationships, we're liable to be feeling, okay, what's going on? What's happening here? We're taking a very serious approach to relationship. We kind of want to get to the bottom line. If you're in the sign of Cancer, a lot of this might be happening with your partner, and so you may be seeing this coming from the outside a little bit. It may be you may feel the pressure is on you from your partner, whereas Capricorn might be feeling it a little bit more on the sense of like, okay, you know, what do I want? Cancer may be saying, what do they want? And it may have to work out that way. It is, at any rate, it is a very active kind of energy. It's the type of thing where things are liable to be moving in relationship. If you felt stuck during Venus's retrograde, if you felt stuck during Mars's retrograde, Mercury, you're likely to feel unstuck. You're likely to feel unstuck. Venus in Sagittarius for a good part of the month after the 7th. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge. It is a little bit wonky and uncomfortable. It is, again, it's a little bit more social, and the signs you've talked about, Margaret, have gotten the best of that energy. When it comes to the yin signs of Taurus, Scorpio, Cancer, Capricorn, yeah, it's a little bit harder. Just as you're trying to make serious decisions, in comes the party invitation, or in comes the sense that you've got to go do something else. So a little bit wonky that way, but I think more or less it is a time of making decisions and pushing forward. Look especially towards that supermoon, lunar eclipse on the 21st. That's also a time when Mars is square to Saturn, and that is going to be a time that is liable to be a real here comes the answer to your questions. As you've been asking this, where are we going? What is happening over the course of the month? Right at that full moon on the 21st is the time when something's liable to give, and we're going to find out about it. If not, you know, it could be on the 23rd when Mercury squares Uranus. There are a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities for openness for these two signs. So I think that there is a seriousness about it, and by the end of the month, you kind of get some answers.
Also interesting, of course, that people probably noticed we're saying the 21st for the supermoon because it depends on the time zone as well that you're in, just to kind of keep that in mind.
Well, and we should emphasize actually that all of these energies tend to build up a few days before we actually say them. You know, it's the time leading up to it that is the strongest. So.
Yes, very good point. So Leo Aquarius, interestingly, this is kind of a fairly quiet time for these two signs this month until the supermoon on the 21st, and then it becomes action time. So really, there's not much happening at the start of the month, which doesn't mean that there's nothing happening in your relationships. It means that there's a lot more flexibility, you know, in terms of what is happening. And there isn't that pressure because when there's, you know, these intense transits on signs, we feel pushed and pulled, you know, emotionally. And of course, when we feel pushed and pulled, that always has an impact on our relationships, particularly the closer we are with people, because our moods change, our, you know, what we want to do changes, all of that affects us. So going straight into the 21st, when we have, you know, the sun into Aquarius, the full moon lunar eclipse at 0 degree Leo, it's a super moon, really a time to let go of, you know, some things and make space for the new. So I really would describe it as almost a late start to the new year. You know, instead of doing this at New Year, this is really a wonderful time for these two signs to do this. And there could be, you know, some revelations that come out, something very interesting as well that, you know, could come to light. But it is really first, there's like really clearing the decks, making some room. Now, a few days later, there's, you know, Mercury goes into Aquarius. It's a very important time for communication. So this might be a very good time, particularly for anybody with planets in Aquarius, to really express your thoughts to loved ones, because Aquarius tends to be amazing at seeing the greater pattern, at really taking a step back and being able to be objective and assess things. That doesn't always help in intimate relationships where it's more about communicating feelings and emotions. So this might be an opportunity to kind of see the greater patterns in your relationship dynamics, but also to express what's going on, to remember that, you know, ultimately intimacy is about, you know, sharing emotions. So for both signs, that's an opportunity maybe to do it. Now, at the very end of the month on the 29th, this is a really important time to communicate something of importance. So it's almost like at the supermoon, you know, you got a sense of it, and then later in the month, you also, you know, realize you need to communicate something. And here's another opportunity. The only thing I would say is keep in mind, it may not be so easy to see the other person's point of view. It may be that you're very clear about your own point of view, but always remember that the other person's point of view may be completely different, not because they're right or wrong, but just because they're seeing it from a completely different perspective. You know, they're standing on a different hill to you and their viewpoint is different. So that's really what's going on for those two signs. So it means you kind of get a little bit of a break earlier in the month. And then, as I say, it's kind of action time really from the 21st onwards, or, you know, as you were saying, Armand, really the lead up to that moon a few days before.
It is a, well, we'll see what happens. The little bit break at the beginning of the month. So we move on to Virgo and Pisces. And Virgo and Pisces, boy, this is a month when, yeah, the energy is definitely hitting you from a sort of odd angle. Most of that Capricorn, Cancer energy should work for you when it comes to relationship, but it's going to require effort. There's a lot of potential, and there's a lot of things you can do with it, but on the other hand, there's not a lot of stuff that is very, very overt. I think maybe around the 13th or so, when Jupiter squares Neptune, that would be a time when it's possible that you'll get something sort of happening to you, but even that feels a little bit more like, you know, your own feelings about things. So there's a lot of potential here, but I'm not sure that it's going to work out for much unless you bring your effort to it. If you do, if you've got something you want to do, if you're, if you're working on your relationship, if you're interested in somebody, if you're feeling that you need to make changes, there are a lot of potential to do so, but you got to bring the effort and the motivation. You've kind of got the wind at your back, but you've got to raise the sail yourself. So it's not a month. I mean, don't worry. We're having Pisces month coming up next, so it's not like it's going to be, you're going to be the exciting ones when it comes to February. But for right now, not so much. It's a good energy. Venus in Sagittarius for most of the month is going to feel a little awkward. It's not necessarily an energy that is conducive to that sort of Virgo Pisces feel to it. That might peak around the 20th, right around the time of the full moon, when it could feel like there's a little bit of a stress and strain. Again, this is a sort of the pull between intimacy and socializing. If you're looking for somebody, or you're looking to look for somebody, then that could be kind of helpful for you, actually. But if you're trying to sort of keep things on an even keel, that might be a day that sort of throws you off a little bit.
So it's really an interesting month, isn't it? Because we're in eclipse season, of course, and whenever eclipse season starts, there's a lot of kind of factors that we don't know, really. There's a lot of unknowns that can happen, both personally and generally. And of course, we're all affected by this greater eclipse energy. And eclipses, by their nature, are about something being eclipsed out of our life to make space for something new. So just to be aware that that's the general theme that's going on for this January, and it's going to affect, as we mentioned, some signs more than others. So a really interesting month. And don't forget that we put daily blogs on our Facebook page, and we'll be, writing about all these transits in details in relationships on a daily basis. And we look forward to seeing you for the, which is the next one, the February, of course. Yes, February, yes. But also, that's what I meant to say, that of course we put the separate recordings for the full moon and the new moon on our Facebook page as well. So have a wonderful January, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year. Take care, Aman. Bye-bye.